for 2026. And we're very excited because we have two very interesting gentlemen with us tonight talking about a very interesting topic. The topic is the problem of evil. So for those of you who have not come across it, allow me just to lay some groundwork for you. From ancient times, from as far back as the Greek philosophers, but particularly through philosophers in more recent times like David Hume, about 3 centuries ago, the question has been posed, how can there be evil in the world if God or the gods, for the Greek philosophers, are in charge of everything and they're supposed to be good guys? So Hume very famously formulated in an argument that says, is God all-powerful? Then why does he not stop evil? Is God all good? Then why does he allow evil? And if there is evil in the world, does that not mean that God is either not all-powerful or not all good, or he doesn't exist at all? So this, what I've just sort of described, has been termed in more recent times the logical problem of evil. It seems to be something that logically doesn't make sense. If there is an all-powerful and all-good God, he should both want the world to be free of evil and he should be capable of making the world free of evil. And yet we look around us and guess what we see? We see evil. How are we to understand this? It seems not to make sense. Now, this is one of those questions that philosophers argued and argued and argued over. To cut a very long story short, it is one of the few questions in modern philosophy where, by and large, most philosophers who work on this question agree that this logical problem of evil has been largely solved. And the solution is, again, without going, because it's not our topic today, without going into detail, is basically if you introduce free will into the equation. It is better for God to make a world where free will is possible, and then there are creatures who can actually choose good for themselves rather than being programmed to do it. And at least as a logical model, that actually makes sense. That a good God would have done a better job to create a world where evil is possible but there is free will. That would be a better world than one where there is no evil but there is no free will. And if you don't believe me, I checked to make sure that I'm not telling you rubbish, and I found that Graham Oppy, who's actually an Aussie from Victoria, but that's okay. He's an atheist philosopher, and he wrote as recently as 2017, and I'll just read this quote for you. While we currently have no good reason for thinking that there are successful logical arguments or successful logical arguments from data on either side of the dispute between naturalists and theists, we also have currently no good reason for thinking that it is impossible that we will someday come into possession of successful logical arguments. Right? So basically what he's saying there is, at the moment, every formulation of this logical problem of evil that we have thought of has been shown not to be a problem against, the idea of God. But that's not to say that someone won't come up with a new logical formulation in the future. So we thought tonight, until someone comes up with a better logical, problem of evil that sort of is more compelling, we're going to kind of leave that to the side, and we're going to look at some other dimensions of the problem of evil, which are probably more relevant to you and me than the logical one. Right? Philosophers love to argue over stuff, jolly good, but we live with the evil, and we have to try and make sense of it. And so tonight we will be talking about other dimensions of the problem of evil, which George will outline and describe when he comes up to speak, and then after that we will be hearing from Steve, who will give us his perspective on it, and then we will have some questions and discussion. And please start thinking of your questions. Maybe you've even brought your own questions already before you start hearing them speak. So I'll explain what we do later on when we get there. But for the first part of the night, I would like to remind you all that the aletheia approach is not to sort of see who's going to win the debate at the end of the night. So if you came here looking for a good fight between an atheist and a Christian, and we're going to see who has the better philosophical reasoning muscles, I'm afraid you're going to be disappointed, because that's not what we're here for. What we do is we get people who have thought about the issues, who have read and studied and have some experience and knowledge about it, and we try to tap into their knowledge. We want to bring out their views and their perspectives so that we can think about them and talk about them and ask questions. And the goal is not that someone will win at the end of the night. The goal is that all of us walk out with a better, a more well-grounded understanding of the topic than we had when we walked in tonight. And I include myself in that, by the way. So you're not going to find, the Roman Colosseum today with gladiators fighting to the death. What you're going to find is the Greek marketplace where the philosophers are walking side by side, putting their ideas and their speculations and bouncing off each other and hopefully coming to something that is of interest to all of us. Yes, and I'll just remind you that our rule always at Aletheia is that you can say anything you like. This is not a place where you have to feel ashamed or, be worried that I don't want to ask this question in front of everybody. Feel free, you can say whatever you like, so long as you are courteous. This is the one rule that we have. So it's a free and open exploration, but what we will not have is people not being nice to each other, because that totally defeats the purpose. So much for what's going to happen. Let me tell you who's going to be making things happen tonight. So we have Steve Marton, who is involved with Sydney Atheists. Is that the correct term for the group? Yeah. Highly involved. He has held a number of high-level positions with that group. He was an optometrist who helped people to see in the literal sense, but latterly has sought to help people see in the religious sense. He wrote a book called The Man Who Created God to show that the foundations of the Abrahamic religions were built on sand and that the Bible and the Quran are based on fiction. Steve has been on the committee or served as president of Sydney Atheists for many years. He has hosted over 80 talks, and Sydney Atheists have partnered with AFA in the what's AFA? The Atheist Foundation of Australia in the 2014 Have You Escaped Religion? We Have Billboard campaign, as well as the 2016 and 2021 census campaigns. So Steve is very kind to give us his time tonight to present us with a perspective on the problem of evil from the point of view of someone who is not a believer in God. I think it's fair to say that you're not a believer in God with that biography. Yes. All right. Dr. George Basillios, is a professor of Christian apologetics who teaches at St. Athanasius Seminary in Nashville, Tennessee, St. Paul Seminary in Canada, and St. Paul's Institute in Egypt. He lectures internationally and has frequently appeared on Christian media platforms. He has written 2 books, Timeless Truth in Truthless Times and Timeless Truth for Teens. I can see he really likes the letter T in the titles of his books, because every word is, almost. He has dual degrees in psychology and philosophy from California State University, Hayward, and has been in the Ministry of Apologetics for over 20 years. His dad was Abuna Basilios Bassillios, the priest of Al-Botrusiyya Church in Cairo. He emigrated from Egypt with his family in 1985 and has lived in the San Francisco Bay Area ever since, serves as a deacon and servant in St. Antonius Coptic Orthodox Church in Hayward, California. Lovely. Okay, so without further ado then, I will invite both Steve and George to come up to the front. And actually, George, if you want to go straight to your speaking position and start to go for it. Thank you. That's not working? Yeah, okay. I should just mention that we do have a bell here, so I'm going to be terribly rude today. I'm going to interrupt lots of people, I'm sure. But when it's sort of close to the end of time, I'll do that for George, and then I'll do that for Steve after.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. It's an honor to be with you this evening. It is an honor to be with Father Antonios. Real honor, because I have heard of Father Antonios. Now it's been 15 years or so, and now I get the chance to meet him and take his blessings. And it's an honor to be in this beautiful church, and also it's an honor to be with Steve. Thank you, Steve, for agreeing to come and give us some illuminating words as well. So, and I'm happy to be with you again. I come all the way from San Francisco to, it's a long flight. It's a 16-hour flight, but it's worth it to come and see you and take your blessings. All right. So as Abuna said, when I say Abuna, I mean Father Antonios, okay? So I'm just going to use the word Abuna quite often. Abuna means my father or our father. We'll talk about the problem of evil. As you can see on the screen, probabilistic, horrendous, natural, and existential problem of evil. I'm not going to have time to cover all of that. I can tell you this. So I'm going to focus primarily on the first, which is the probabilistic perspective of the problem of evil and suffering. What is the objective? My objective is to demonstrate that the existence of evil does not defeat the Christian worldview, but rather points towards the necessity of a Redeemer. That's the objective. And let's dive in. Before we dive into specifically the probabilistic dimension of the problem of evil and suffering, I want to mention two distinct questions. I'm sorry if I'm making too much noise here. Two distinct questions of evil. The first is an argument about God's existence. The question usually presents itself as, is God there? Is he real? And this is about the existence of God and evidence for his existence. And this needs philosophy and clarity. The other question is a protest against God's goodness. So the question shifts from, is God there, to, is God good? And this deals with trust and character. And this one doesn't need philosophy and clarity. It needs pastoral honesty. So I could say one speaks to the mind, the other speaks to the heart. Okay, so there are two distinct questions of evil. And there are the four versions of the problem, as I mentioned earlier. I'm just going to go over it very quickly and briefly. The probabilistic problem of evil, basically it says that given the amount of suffering and evil in this world, is God unlikely to exist? Secondly, the horrendous problem of evil, which basically states, and these are very, very concise definitions, can a good God allow all the evil in the world? Thirdly, the natural dimension of the problem of evil and suffering, earthquakes, cancer, viruses, disease. Why this kind of world? Lastly, the existential problem of evil. Where is God in my own pain, in my own suffering? So as you can see, some speak to the mind and some speak to the heart. All right. Now let me begin by defining what is evil, so that we can have the same definition. What's the ontology of evil? What is it? What's the diagnosis of evil? Well, evil is not a substance in itself created by God, as you can see on this screen. It's a corruption of what is good. Evil is a deprivation of what is good. I'll give you an example. I use this example quite often. If I say that this phone that I have is old, what am I presupposing? What am I implying? What do you think? When I say this is old, what am I implicitly saying? I know what a new phone looks like, or else I wouldn't know this is old. So when I say this is evil, what am I presupposing or implying? That I know what good is, because evil is the deprivation of what is good. All right, so that's kind of the definition of evil. Every worldview, every ideology, every philosophy, every religion, it doesn't matter what it is, must address two questions of evil. What is it? Define, diagnose. Secondly, what is the solution to the problem? Now, we keep saying the problem of evil. What do we need? We need a solution to that problem. And then usually you say the problem of evil and suffering. Okay, kind of like, you get suffering kind of involved as a result of evil. So what do we need for suffering? Suffering is a mystery. We need an explanation to it. Evil is a problem. We need a solution to it. How can we get the explanation for the mystery of suffering and a solution for the problem of evil? And that's every worldview must provide an answer. Now, the answer to these two questions must both be, or must meet both the intellectual and the emotional demand of the question. Give me some intellectually satisfying response and an emotionally fulfilling response. What is evil and what is the solution to it? I will skip this slide. I don't want to get too overly academic on that. So let's just go on to the probabilistic perspective, also known as the evidential problem of evil. Here's the argument. The argument as such: the sheer amount and duration and distribution of evil and suffering in the world make an all-good, an all-powerful God highly improbable, unlikely. So it's a probabilistic issue. And I think Father Antonius had eloquently explained that early on. That's the argument. Now, there are some hidden assumptions. And let me share with you these assumptions. Here's the premise of this syllogistic argument. If God is good and powerful, he would eliminate all evil immediately. Now, there's a problem with that premise. The premise assumes that if I cannot see a reason for evil, then there is no reason for evil. Now, what's the correct mindset or response to that problem? The reasoning here commits what I call a category fallacy or a category mistake. It assumes that a finite mind can judge and assess infinite probabilities. That is the category mistake. Now, what's the response? How can we address this argument, the probabilistic argument of evil and suffering? I wanted to make it as simple as possible. Not seeing a reason for evil is not the same as there is no reason for evil. So to judge evil as pointless and gratuitous, we need to know the long-range ripple effects of that event or that incident or that what we call evil. We need to have that perspective, that infinite perspective, to know what's going on now and to know what will that yield in years to come. But the question is, do we have that vantage point? Do we have that infinite perspective that can say what seems to be evil now is ultimately evil years from now, let alone months from now? All right. So our limited perspective would be my response for the probabilistic problem of evil. Here's what we see: a tragedy, some kind of, some evil of some sort. An isolation may seem like a meaningless event, gratuitous event. What we lack is context, future ripple effects, as I said, and hidden goods that we don't have simply the perspective to see. So what follows? We're not in a position to declare any evil gratuitous unless we claim to be omniscient and have this total knowledge. So to wrap up this point, not knowing God's reason for permitting evil does not prove that such reasons do not exist. I repeat that again. Unless we can demonstrate that God could not possibly have a morally sufficient reason to allow evil, the argument doesn't logically follow. I'm going to use some verses from the scriptures. Okay, Romans 8:28. St. Paul says to the Romans, we know. He speaks with conviction. He begins saying, we know that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. Not just that one thing, all things, what seems to be evil and what seems to be anywhere in between good and evil. All things will work together for what? For good. Another verse from the scriptures, this is Joseph in Genesis 50. He said, you meant evil against me, speaking to his brothers. You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good. What is it? Evil itself. He meant that evil for good in order to save many people alive. And last verse I'll share with you, Ephesians 1:11. Him who works all things according to the counsel of his will. All things. He knows what's going on now and in the future. Now it's difficult for us as human beings. Why? Because we live in a space-time continuum. We can only see what's going on here, and we can only see what's going on now. We're confined with that space and time. But the God we worship is beyond space and time, meaning he's infinite beyond space and eternal beyond time. He sees what I cannot see. So as I said earlier, the solution here is what? Epistemic humility. What I mean by epistemic, humility in knowledge. Epistemology is the field of how do we know what we know. So to be humble in the fact that I don't know. I don't know what is unknown because I'm confined by space and time. The best example I can share with you is the book of Job in the Old Testament. Now, Job, for 38 chapters, he was a righteous man. The Bible said, a righteous man who would offer sacrifices for him and his family. But for 38 chapters, he kept asking the question, why, God, have you inflicted or allowed that pain and suffering unto my life and my children, my family? What have I done to you? I am a good guy, by your admission. Why? He was struggling. 38 chapters he's asking the question why. Now God told him, are you done, Job? Did you get everything out of your system? Now let me ask you some questions. And these are 66 or 62? 62, you don't have to see all that. But 62 questions God is asking Job. Where were you when I did that, when I created this universe? Where were you when I did this and this and this and this and this? What was God trying to tell Job? You know what? One simple truth. I am God, you are not. You don't know why I am doing what I am doing. If Job could not comprehend natural events that God had created, how would he comprehend God's answer for allowing evil and suffering to exist? As I said, God was in essence saying, I am God, and you are just have to what? Trust me. As St. Paul said, all things work together for good. Trust me. This is for your own good. At the very end, Job came to the realization that what God allowed for him, or the pain that was inflicted upon him and suffering, was actually for his own good. Listen to what he said in the last chapter. He said, therefore, I have uttered what I did not understand. Things too wonderful for me which I did not know. Please let me speak. You said, I will question you and you shall answer me. Here's the most famous quote of Job. I have heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eye sees you. My eye could only see you when I realized my ignorance. That's why I always tell the youth that I speak to, I say the most supreme type of knowledge we should strive to attain is the knowledge of our ignorance. The most supreme type of knowledge that we should strive to attain is the knowledge of our ignorance. I'll give you an example. This is a real example. This is not my wife or my son. This is just an image from the internet. But I'll share with you a real quick example. When my son, I have two boys. When my son was 3 months old, I took him with my wife to get vaccinated. And then here he is in my arms, in my wife's arms, and we're going to the physician's office. And here's my son who's 3 months old. This is way before COVID. This is something else, okay? And then he looks at me and he looks at his mom and he says, what are you guys doing? Do you see this guy? Do you see the needle that he's got in his hand? He's going to thrust this needle in my arm and you just let him do that? Do you not love me anymore? What are you doing? And sure enough, here the physician comes and inflicts the pain of the needle in his arm and he cries. My son keeps crying. But there's a little bit of comfort, just a little bit of comfort, knowing that he is what? In my arms, in my wife, in his mother's arms. But he's perplexed. Why are we allowing this pain and suffering to be inflicted by a stranger when you all love me as my mom and dad? Now, let me ask you, if I were to explain to my son what is going on, do you think he will know anything? Absolutely not. Well, when will he understand? When he matures. When he gets to be 15, 16, 17, and he realizes that temporal, limited, finite, temporary suffering that he endured at the doctor's office was for his own sake. What did he not have? That perspective. He didn't know why we're doing what we're doing. So if God were to tell us why he's doing what he's doing, even so, we wouldn't understand. So I can say that I don't know the purpose for some evil. Yes, I admit that. But I know why I don't know. I don't know. But here is what I do know, and I want to share this with you. Here is what I do know. Listen I'm going to try to simplify as much as I can here. I know that an all-knowing God who I worship knows the end of all things. Because he's omniscient and he's all-knowing, he knows the end of all things. And I know that an all-loving God wants to bring all things to a good end. And I know that an all-powerful God can bring all things to a good end. Therefore, all things will come to a good end. I know that the God I worship is all-knowing, omniscient, all-loving, omnibenevolent, all-powerful, omnipotent. That's all I need to know. And I can trust that he knows, he's powerful, and most of all, he loves me. Therefore, I'm in good hands. All things will work together for good. All things will come to a good end. So, we sometimes look back for an explanation. I need to know why. You'd be surprised how many questions I had from youth globally during COVID in 2020. Why? Why is God allowing innocent people to suffer? Why? And I heard that question repeatedly. Now I say, you know why you're asking why? You need to know that. Is it to satisfy your intellectual curiosity? Because our society has conditioned us. If I have a question, I've got the answer with a couple of clicks. AI will give me the answer without even having to click anything. I have questions, I can go and get the answers. I need to know why. As if God owes me an explanation as to why he's doing what he's doing. So my response would be, Do not ask the question why to satisfy your intellectual curiosity, because even if he were to tell you why, you still wouldn't know. Now ask the question differently. Here's the question that would be much more edifying and productive for you. What is the lesson that you're trying to send me or teach me during these difficult times? Only then will you learn a lesson and be edified. So instead of looking back for an explanation, we ought to look forward for a purpose. A thought experiment I'll share with you. I was just thinking, and I said to myself, if God would give me His omnipotence, His power for just 24 hours, just give me your power for 24 hours, and you'll see how many changes I will make in this world. No more famines, no more natural disasters, no more abuse, no more cancer, none of that. No more wars, none of that. Just give me your power for 24 hours, and I will make so many changes in this world. This world is messed up. I'm going to change it if you give me your power for 24 hours. But if He were to give me His knowledge and wisdom too, I would leave everything as is. The problem is we think that God should do things differently. But we need to realize our limited perspective. He is God, I am not. That is basically the perspective that we need to have. Now, what do I do? As I told you, I know that He's all loving, all powerful, and all knowing. That suffices for me. To me, that gives me what? When I'm going through difficult times in my life, and believe me, I have. What gives me comfort, consolation, hope, is that I know that God, who I call Father, cares for me, loves me, and will make everything work together for good, because I know that He loves me and He knows that which I do not know. So here's the challenge I leave you with. If you have a God great enough to be angry at because He hasn't stopped all the evil and suffering in the world, then you also at the same time have a God great enough to have good reasons for allowing it to continue that you cannot know. You cannot have it both ways. Let me read that again for you. If you have a God great enough to be mad at and angry at because He hasn't stopped evil and suffering in the world, then you have at the same time a God who's great enough to have good reasons for allowing it to continue that you cannot know, and you cannot have it both ways. Here are some verses in the scriptures I will close with. When I think I'm out of time.
No, you're doing well.
I am.
You've got 8 minutes.
8 minutes. Okay, well, I'm not going to close it. Okay, forgive me. I'll keep going for maybe 5 more minutes. I don't want to keep you. Sure. So here are some verses from the scriptures. All right. That I want to share with you, that basically describe my position, who I am and who God is. In Isaiah 55, God is speaking, saying, "My thoughts are not your thoughts, nor are your ways my ways, says the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." Is He trying to belittle me or make me feel ashamed or small? Absolutely not. God is trying to tell me one thing that He tried to tell Job. I am God. You're not. Humble yourself with your knowledge. Here's another verse in the New Testament, Romans 11:33. Oh, the depth of the riches, both of the wisdom and knowledge of God. How unsearchable are His judgments, and His ways past finding out. For who has known the mind of the Lord, or who has become His counselor? And you know what, my dear friends? Oftentimes, we think that we know better than what God is doing. And I call this, I'll be very honest with you, I call this intellectual pride. That's why I say the solution is epistemic, intellectual humility, to know who I am and who God is. Let me skip the horrendous aspect or dimension of evil. I think I've got some slides I want to share with you since I've got 4 more minutes. All right. So, there you go. So when I talk to non-believers and they tell me, I don't believe in your God, I say, okay, why? And they say, because of all the evil in this world. And Father Antonius has eloquently described how this logical problem of evil has been refuted or put to rest. But they say there's a lot of evil in this world. I try not to respond. I respond with a question. What is evil, as I said earlier, and what is your solution to the problem of evil? Now, we live in a world where evil is real. It is not an illusory thing, or it's not an illusion. Evil is real. But I need to have some kind of solution to it that satisfies me, again, intellectually and emotionally. Now, my response is very simple, yet very powerful. My response to the solution for the problem of evil and suffering is the cross of Jesus Christ. Our Lord Jesus Christ entered into evil. He did not create the world and basically let us experience all the pain and suffering, and he's looking at us from his high horse and say, oh, you guys do deal with it. He conquered evil by entering through it and into it. He takes upon himself the pain and suffering on the cross. Now, what does that tell me about this God? One attribute that is the central theme of the Christian faith: love. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. Secondly, not only did he solve the problem of evil by entering into it, he transformed the mystery of suffering. Suffering is no longer meaningless, gratuitous, pointless. Suffering now becomes what? For Christians, it's fellowship with Christ. St. Paul says that in Philippians, that I may know him, the power of his resurrection, and the fellowship of his suffering. Now, it has a different meaning when I suffer. It is not pointless. So, when I suffer, what happens? Christ suffers with me. How can that be? Well, let me share with you some verses from the scriptures. Saul, Saul. This is when Paul was going to Damascus to persecute Christians in Acts chapter 9. Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? This is the Lord Jesus Christ appearing to Saul. Now, wait a minute. Saul could have said, hey, listen, Jesus, I didn't touch you. Who are you? I'm persecuting the Christians. Well, what is the Lord Jesus saying here? Persecuting my children hurts me. So when I hurt, he hurts as well. He also said, God said in Zechariah, he who touches you touches the apple of his eye. And in all their affliction, he was afflicted. That's in Isaiah 63. In the liturgy, when we pray the liturgy here in the church, the priest says, you have borne the oppression of the wicked. You have given your back to the scourge. Your cheeks you have left open to those who smite. For my sake, O my master, you have not hidden your face from the shame of spitting. This is the God whom we worship. Entered into suffering for my sake, to transform the meaning of suffering. All right, I'm going to skip a few other things and get to one quote I want to share with you by James Stewart of Scotland. He compelled their dark achievements to serve his ends, not theirs. They nailed him to the tree, not knowing that by that very act they were bringing the world to his feet. They gave him a cross, not guessing that he would make it a throne. They flunked him outside the gates to die, not knowing that in that very moment they were lifting up all the gates of the universe to let the king come in. They thought to root out his doctrines, not understanding that they were implanting in the hearts of men the very name they intended to destroy. They thought they had God with his back to the wall, pinned, helpless, and defeated. They did not know that it was God himself who had tracked them down. He did not conquer in spite of the dark mystery of evil. He conquered through it. How powerful is that, knowing that my God has given me the solution to the problem of evil and suffering. Finally, here's my cumulative case for the problem of evil and why it does not defeat Christianity. Logically, there's no contradiction. We heard the introduction of Father Antonius. We do not have that vantage point, this omniscient vantage point. From a nature perspective, a stable world of physical laws is necessary for free moral agents, and that answers the problem of natural evil. Morality, my outrage at evil, my anger towards abuse and genocide and all that proves that we live in a moral universe. Where did that moral value come from is an important question to address. Only Christianity, I believe, offers a God who suffers with us and who gives us hope after death. So, my question finally is, would you rather have a God who explains all suffering but remains distant, or a God who enters suffering to carry it with you? And last slide, and I promise this is my last slide. This is something I've written during COVID times in 2020, when everyone was asking why. I wrote this, and this was on Facebook or Instagram, one of them. I said, and the question was, why can't God stop all evil? I'll leave you with that question. I said, why can't God stop all evil? Well, because God cannot do what is mutually exclusive. He cannot create the reality of love without the freedom to reject it. Otherwise, it wouldn't be love. Now, here's the question that we ought to ask ourselves. Would you rather live in a loveless world, or a world where good and love ultimately will triumph over evil and hate? Which world would you rather live in? I personally would much rather live in the latter world, a world where love and goodness will ultimately triumph over evil and hate. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for that, George. You timed it to perfection.
Oh, great! I heard the alarm.
Yes. So lots to think about there. Personally, I've written down quite a few questions, but now over to Steve, please, for your perspective.
Get this out of the way.
I could use it.
Steve, I'm here to learn from you as well. All right, there you go.
Can I close this down?
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Good evening, and it's great to be here. It's great to have the invitation of Antonius. George, Antonius, and I have had much discussion, so we're very familiar with each other, not in the wrong sense, but we are very familiar. So it's great to be together. Whilst it took George 16 hours to fly here, it's taken me, I live in Warriewood, it's taken me 16 hours to walk here, just so you know. It's a great honour to speak to people of an Egyptian background. I have the greatest respect for the civilization that was Egypt, and I know a lot of people that are from Egypt, both Coptic Christians, but also Muslims, ex-Christians and ex-Muslims. So it's great to be here, and thank you for coming along. Does evil prove that there isn't a God? For over 50 years, I had been an atheist. But in researching evil for this discussion, I've come to a very different realization of God. Why should the presence of evil prove or disprove the presence of a God? In fact, the presence of evil proves that God does indeed exist. And my atheist friends might be shocked by me saying that. If we disregard the fact that the Bible says that the earth is only 6,000 years old and accept the scientific lessons of paleontology being the study of life on earth, as God is all-powerful and in control of history, he had already destroyed early humanoids, such as Australopithecus, Homo habilis, Homo erectus, Heidelbergensis, Neanderthals, and Denisovans. Thus, God caused extinctions of humanoids for over 7 million years. For most of us, that's an unimaginable period of time, but there it is. Let's look at the facts understood in the biblical text. God protected Cain even though Cain killed Abel. And I don't know how well you know the story, but Cain was protected for generations beyond his own existence. God made women suffer for eons just because Eve gave of the fruit of knowledge to Adam. Women would suffer the pain of childbirth and a subordinate role to husbands because of the perceived action of one woman, who God himself created from the rib of Adam. God seemingly was disappointed in his creation of Homo sapiens. That's us. He killed all but 8 humans during the Great Flood. He also killed virtually all living creatures and land-based flora. God allowed Abraham to blackmail a pharaoh and the king Abimelech. God proposed and allowed generations of Hebrews to suffer under bondage by the Egyptians. God allowed the firstborn of the Hebrews to be slaughtered by the Egyptians. That's not you guys, it's ancient. God set 10 plagues on the Egyptians as sport between Moses and Pharaoh, with inordinate Egyptian suffering, distress, and death due to the 10 plagues foisted on Egyptians who had no interest in the Pharaoh-Moses interlude. When the Hebrews were let out of bondage by Moses, apart from 2 Hebrew leaders, no man over the age of 20 years of age at the start of Exodus would live to get to the promised land. They all died. The most famous philosophical example of God testing someone involves unnecessary agony. And George referred to it, the story of Job. God enters a bet with Satan to see if Job will remain faithful. To win the bet, God allows Job's children to be killed, his servants murdered, and his body covered in painful sores. The argument was, if God is omniscient, he already knew Job would stay faithful. Therefore, the torture and death of Job's family served no informative purpose. It was a cosmic game played with human lives. It was God who created heaven and hell. Hell would be the abode of those who would not be convinced of his existence. It would also be the abode of those who would not follow his directives. His failure to convince people of his existence or his directions was very disappointing, when it would be so easy to do. So it must be assumed that he derived great pleasure in having people suffer with their burning of their entire bodies for eternity. It was God who created the devil, and it was God who did not curtail the devil's abilities. Clearly, he has delighted in the success of the devil in causing deviation from good and increasing the number of people ending up in the burning fires of hell. So, God has a track record of inducing suffering. As he has awareness of the past, present, and the future, he is complicit in suffering, and the suffering proves that he exists. Given that God knows the past, present, and the future, what purpose does praying have? If he is aware of a bad outcome, it's surely his design. And why would he change it? Christians tortured and killed people for disbelief, and killed one another because of different interpretations of Christianity. God knew that this would happen. He knew that Muslims would do the same thing right through the 21st century. We're all aware of the commandments, but do you know just how many commandments there were? There were 248 positive commandments and 365 negative commandments, inclusive of stoning people for homosexual acts, adultery, blasphemy, wizardry, and working on the Sabbath. Let's talk about Jesus' input into the affairs of God. Most Christians believe in the Trinity of God, the Son Jesus, and the Holy Spirit. So a great deal of blame for suffering sits on the shoulders of Jesus. I mean God. Or do I mean the Holy Spirit? Let's say it's Jesus. Jesus was born to Mary, and though he was God, he did nothing godly for the first 30 years of his time on planet Earth. Given that he would have people burn for eternity, one would imagine that Jesus would do his best to make clear his directives to Homo sapiens on planet Earth. Rather than have various people write about him, sometimes 60 years or more after his passing, and have those words misconstrued, I would imagine the best way forward would be to clearly and unambiguously write down what he would desire of people. That way, he would avoid internecine fighting and killing by people who had different views and interpretations of texts, such as the New Testament. Appropriate texts might also convince non-followers of his directives. But nay, neither in his first 30 years on planet Earth, nor his last 3 years, in which time he spoke and was Jesus the man that you know him to be, did he write anything? Clearly, he would entertain fighting, death, and destruction due to his literary negligence. Furthermore, he would only be present in the Middle East, not bothering to enlighten people in distant lands who would not enjoy the rewards of eternal life in heaven. Again, that proves that God exists because he denied them the same courtesies as those in the Middle East. So clearly, God has been consistent in driving evil, and this proves his existence. Just as he has done so frequently and purposefully in history, even in modern times, he delights in suffering. What else do we know about God? We know that he loves adoration. He craves attention and servitude. He seeks sycophants. The same traits in humans would suggest narcissistic personality disorder. It's a foundational expectation throughout not just the Old and New Testaments, but also through the Quran. God also likes to be feared, and the Bible repeats the fear of God some 300 times. If there were no earthly suffering and despicable acts of terror, it would prove that God did not exist. But his behavior as described in the Bible is consistent with his behavior, attitudes and demands as witnessed by all. God loves evil, and it was his choice to institute it. After all, with all his power, he could have overcome evil. So what is it? Does God exist and he is evil? Or does man's acts of decency, respect, and humility overcome and prove that God does not exist? That we can overcome the evil villain that is God. Clergy often claim that God is a beacon of love. Yet biblical records show a deity that drowns infants, bets on the torture of his followers, and overrides human will just to justify a massacre. If a human did these things, we would call them a monster. When God does them, you call it justice. So here's the truth. A world filled with only good would be an undeniable miracle, a proof of a perfect creator. But a world filled with bone cancer, tsunamis, and holy slaughter is not a miracle. It's a crime scene. If God exists, the evidence of evil doesn't prove he's absent, it proves that he's guilty. Thank you.
Well, our speakers have been wonderful with their timing today. And may I congratulate both of you on being so concise and getting to your points really, really well and expressing them very, very eloquently, I think, on both sides. A lot to think about there. According to our format, George, there's an opportunity. Would you like to say some thoughts responding to what Steve has said? And then after that, we'll dive into some questions that I would like to put to either of you. And just use your microphone there.
Okay, sure.
You've all got your own microphone.
Thank you, Steve. I just few thoughts. I just want to clarify that the Bible never says that the earth is 6,000 years old. Just a clarification. I don't think that was in the scriptures. And it seems that, and I see where you're coming from, and I hear your position, Steve, with all the atrocities and the evil that was, you mentioned in the Old Testament. I see that. It's just that what I would like to say is it would be unjust if I were to judge events, situations, and circumstances that happened in ancient Near East civilization with the lens of the 21st century. And if we were to study how the world was basically lived at that time, we will see almost two different worlds. Now, I also want to say that God is the author of life, and he has the power to take that life and restore that life. Now, what happened to those whom we think were innocently killed? We look at it again, we look at the situation from a perspective that is wrong, that is evil. But the God who allowed this to happen is the same God who can restore this life as well. And another question is, how do I explain and how do I ground my moral outrage against this God who had done all of these allegedly evil things? How can I ground this moral outrage? How can I say this is evil? This is horrible. I have got to have some point of reference. Where does that come from? When I see abuse, gratuitous killing, and all of that, how do I know this is bad? In other words, how can I have a position of morality in a world that is amoral or non-moral? So that's a question I personally, and I'm, in all honesty, I would like to have an answer for. One more thing, when I just give me one more minute, is that there is a difference between God's foreknowledge of what's going to happen and God intervening with what happens. Foreknowledge, simply because God is above the dimension of time. He's timeless. He doesn't have past, present, future. He has one dot where the past, the present, the future converge together. So he knows what's going to happen to me 5 years from now or 5 days from now. But his foreknowledge doesn't impede upon my freedom to act how I want to act. And I gave the example of, let's say if, I love sports. I love American football. And I record the games because I'm in church when the football games are played on Sunday. So I record the games. And when I go home to watch the recording, let's say someone comes and tells me the score, which I don't like very much. But when they do that, they ruin the game for me, but I still watch the game. Now I know the score. The players don't, but I have that perspective. The game had ended. For me, I can see that score, but the players don't see it, and they continue to play. So God has that privileged perspective. He knows what's going to happen, but does not interfere with my free will. Last thing I want to say is that God did not create Satan. God created angels and gave these angels free will to be exercised, and they abused and misused that free will and then turned out to be Satan and the devil. So just few clarifying remarks that I just wanted to point out. But once again, Steve, I appreciate what you said. As a matter of, I wish this is recorded, Abuna, because I want to go back to the recording and understand fully what you have said. So thank you.
All righty. Thank you very much. A quick response, Steve?
Does this work? Yep, thank you. Thanks, George, for your comments. The Old Testament is fairly clear as to when everything began. They're certainly not clear that the universe is 13 billion years old. Anyway, that's okay. But as far as the New Testament and the Old Testament, to quote Matthew, Jesus says, "Do not think that I've come to abolish the law of the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them." So Jesus' mission was no different to what is listed in the Old Testament, and all the laws that are there and all the abominations that at the time might have seemed reasonable and people would have accepted, but today that we would not accept. As far as heaven goes, if I can say, and may I ask you two questions? The first is there evil or suffering in heaven?
That's a question for me.
Binary question.
What do you mean by heaven?
Okay. So let me ask another question in that case, because I don't know where Coptic Christians are with regard to heaven. Do you believe that there's a heaven that you will ascend to if you're a good person?
Our understanding of heaven is the presence of Jesus Christ. So that is what makes heaven heaven, is to be with our Lord Jesus Christ. So that, just want to make sure we have the right definition of what heaven is. Heaven is not just a place to have fun in. Heaven is to be in the presence of God. So with that definition, what would be the question?
Thanks for clarifying that. So unfortunately, I've spoken to too many Christians who have such a different view of heaven that I wasn't clear on that.
Yes.
And I would have to rethink everything. But let's assume that being in the presence of Jesus, God, and the Holy Spirit is a good thing.
It's a wonderful thing.
Okay. So supposedly it's a wonderful thing. Okay. So to be in their presence is wonderful. Do you believe that there's a hell?
again, I just want to understand, what do you mean by hell?
Not having any belief, I'm, up for your opinion of hell, because I don't have an opinion of hell. I don't believe that there is a hell, so I don't know what hell means.
Right. In Christian theology...
Can I be clear?
Sure.
Is it Christian theology or Coptic Christian theology?
No, Christian theology.
Okay, so you're speaking for Catholics, Coptics, Pentecostals, and Anglicans.
So I might just jump in, because it is a fascinating question, the problem of hell, but I think it's a different one to the one that we're really focusing on today, which is the problem of evil in the world that we experience. That's sort of I'm not in any way saying that that's not a really interesting question, but what happens after we leave this world, after we die, is, I think, its own question. So what I might do at this stage, I'll start jumping in if that's okay. I want to actually start by asking you a question, both of you.
Sure.
In all that we've spoken about so far, what do you feel you both would agree about? Is there anything you would agree about in this, the question of evil in the world? Is there anything you could say, I think Steve and I can both give a tick to this?
If I may, and I just wanted to get to the question that Steve was going to ask about hell, but I respect your intervention of one.
We can have you back next week,
okay,
both
all
of
right.
you.
But I think Steve and I would agree, and I would, think most, if not all of us, would agree. We don't like evil. We don't like suffering. I think that we both agree on that.
You definitely agree with that. What else do you guys? Is there anything else beyond that? I think, yeah.
There is also, sorry, I'll let you speak, Steve, in a second. But we both agree that we humans have worth, value, and dignity, or else all the killings that was mentioned that would be justified. But we both have value, worth, and dignity. Would you say we would agree on that?
100%.
Excellent.
Anything else you guys can think of that you would agree on?
I think we both are enamored of love and despise hate.
Yeah.
I agree with you on that.
Okay.
For sure. For sure.
All right. I think, that's great. I think it's just good to get some of those things there as a foundation. And I think, most people who are arguing about this question or thinking about this question are really coming from the foundations that both of you have just described. And that's why it is a problem for the Christian, because it seems to be a problem, and, for the atheist, because it doesn't seem to be consistent. George, I have a question for you. So you, if I've understood what you're saying, is you're saying that we are not, as limited human beings, in a position to pass judgment on the wisdom of God, on what he does. Is that a fair summary? I know it's very simplistic and leaves out a lot of the details that you said.
It's a fair summary, I would say.
All right. So what I want to ask you is, could it be said that this just boils down to the, don't ask, just believe sort of response? Or is it in some way different?
I think it's different.
So how is it different?
I'm not a fan of don't ask, just believe, because our Christian faith is not based on blind convictions at all. We actually encourage in our faith biblical criticism, theological criticism, and we encourage dialogue, but blind faith is not what we believe in. I would say that ask, and you'll get answers, satisfying answers. However, there are some questions that will always remain unanswerable, and that's the tension between faith and reason. Now, they're not contradictory to one another. They actually complement one another. So reason will take me to a point, and then faith will take me transcendent to that point. So, I encourage questions, and I want people to ask questions, but not every question will have an answer.
Right, and that's this idea of epistemic humility you were talking
Absolutely.
about. Epistemic just means how we know stuff. So basically, that we should be humble in what we can know is basically what you're saying.
That's correct.
All right, Steve, if I may ask you a question. While you were speaking, I felt a lot of the stuff you were talking about referred to a God who I actually don't believe in as well. And it is, as I'm sure you're quite aware, there's a broad variety of ways of conceiving of God within Christianity, not to mention, within all the different monotheistic religions. So my question is this: when you come to address a question like this, do you feel it is important to exercise the principle of charity, the idea that one should search for the strongest, most convincing version of a belief and then address that, rather than settling for, a lesser version kind of thing? Is that one of the things you do in your approach to these kinds of questions, or and I do appreciate we're a little weird and unusual, and not many people have heard of the Orthodox Christianity, let alone Coptic Christianity. But a lot of the stuff you were saying felt to me like the evangelical God, or maybe even the Calvinistic God, which in some ways I wouldn't believe in myself.
Antonio, so I'm not sure that I can answer the question the way you'd like me to answer it, and I'm not sure that you know what answer you're looking for necessarily. However, I guess what I should do is talk about my journey. And my journey is that I once upon a time believed in a monotheistic God. And when I learned about evolution and I understood that there were these humanoids that were pre-Homo sapiens that we are, and understanding that this process has taken 7 million years or more, and understanding that evolution has taken 12 billion years, or however long Earth has been here, and understanding that there's this vastness of the universe, and that there's, for example, a star out there, UV Scuti, and that is 1,700 times the size of our sun. So that particular star would not only encompass Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, but would also encompass Jupiter. So there's this vastness that is beyond comprehension for a lot of people. And we know of the universe that we are in. What we don't know is how many universes there are. And our universe is made up of unimaginable, numbers that we can't even compute. There are billions and billions of stars, billions of planets, moons, and we're just a very, very, very small speck. So for me to think that in this vastness of our universe and the vastness of however many universes there are, that there would be a creature that actually cares about me is a bridge too far. So the questions that you suggest might be asked, I don't ask. I have no belief in the Judeo-Christian Islamic God. I have no belief in the Aztec gods, in the Chinese gods, in the Scandinavian gods, in the Australian Aboriginal gods. I don't have belief in any of these gods. My view is that all gods are man-made in the imagination of humans and utilised for power, control and financial gain.
Right.
So I don't ask those questions.
Yeah, so look, I'm fascinated. So, I've met a lot of people who lost their faith because they felt hurt, in a sense, by God, they thought that God would protect them from something or answer a prayer that really mattered to them, and they didn't. And that's a kind of a problem of evil, right? You know, why would God let this evil happen to me? From what I understand, you're saying that's not really played a part in your journey. It's been more you can't sort of see a place for God in the modern view of the universe. He doesn't have a job. Would I be right in saying that?
Certainly not in the modern sense of the universe or the ancient sense of the universe, whatever that might mean. But no, I certainly cannot see a place for any God that actually cares about anybody.
Right. Yeah.
It's an irrelevance to me.
Right. And so therefore the evil that happens in the world, in a sense, sort of isn't a question you'd ask, basically, because it's the God you could imagine wouldn't even care about us. So he wouldn't be responsible for the evil either.
So the evil that happens on planet Earth is an evil that I don't believe we should delegate to a God, blame a God, give credit to a God for. Evil is something that humans need to attend to. We have incredible evil on planet Earth as we sit here. We have a President of the United States who is there at the pleasure of Christians in the United States and other people in the United States, goodness knows. He's a despicable human being. We have a dictator in Russia. We had a dictator in Iran. We have a dictator in North Korea. There are places on this planet where dictators want to assume power. And we live in a democracy. It may be the best democracy, it may not be the best democracy, but we live in a democracy, and it's up to us to make sure that we are in a fair and decent society. And we're just so lucky to be here. And I think I can say, unless we're Aboriginal, we're all immigrants to this country, and we're damn lucky to be here.
Well, I almost said that's something else that you and George could agree on, and then I remembered George is actually from America, so allow us to be a little patriotic, George, if that's okay.
All good.
Australians...
I don't want to get into political discussions.
No, we're not here to talk politics, no. All right, we're going to open the floor. We want to leave plenty of time for you guys to...
Can I just make one
I'll just give the instructions.
Sure.
And then, so what we do, we have a microphone here at the front. If you would like to ask a question, please, you see where Matthew is there, putting the microphone. Please come and sit in the bench there in nice order. So, and then what we'll do is we'll go through the questions. Can I ask you, please, to keep your questions short and to the point, everyone. Okay, we've had the talks already. We don't need more talks. So please shorten to the point. So while people are gathering, please think of your question. Come, take your place. George, please.
Just one very quick comment. We're talking about the problem of evil and suffering. And we have shared our outrage about the evil we experience. I want us to think about the evil we actually do. That's very different. Where did that come from? And how can I find a solution to it? Because if I say, why can't God stop all evil? You know what? This church would be empty in a second. Because we are the moral agents of evil. So it's important to think of it in this context. Evil is not out there. Evil is within the heart of human. Where did that come from, and how can we solve it, rather than blaming God on everything he does?
So I dare to suggest this may be another point of agreement, which is that, while it's a fascinating question, why is there evil? Is God the cause of it? And so on. Maybe, I think you said in your talk, that the more important question to ask is the future one. What am I going to do about evil? And I think, I don't know, would you agree with that, Steve?
George, I'm not sure that I understood what you said, but are you suggesting that there's evil within us?
I strongly suggest that there is evil within us.
So I would suggest that you speak for yourself and not on my behalf.
All right.
Because my whole life has been helping people to see. And if I can relate the most striking thing that ever happened to me, or one of the most striking things, there are a lot of striking things that happened to me, but one of the most striking things was I had a young girl, she was 8 years old. She'd had a cataract removed out of each eye. She was only 8 years old, cataract out of each eye. She had had 3 corneal transplants. I don't know whether you understand the significance of a corneal transplant, but it means that the front of the eye of this little girl was so affected, that part of her cornea, the front of the eye, had to be removed and a new one had to be placed in. 3 times, the girl's 8 years old. The little girl was referred to me, and a lot of the work that I did was inflicting pain on people. So the only way that I could help this little girl to see was to put a hard contact lens on her eye. Has anybody here worn a hard contact lens? How did it feel? It's pretty bad. So there are people that have to wear hard contact lenses because of their eye circumstances, and it hurts like hell. Anyway, I put the contact lenses on this little girl, tested her eyes, and I said to the mother, who just happened to be Muslim, I said to the mother, your daughter, when she reaches driving age, will be able to drive a car. And she said, what would she have said being a Muslim? That's what she said. And I thought, so what I said and what I thought were 2 different things. What I thought was, F this. What I said was, it wasn't your God that did this, it was me. She didn't know I'm an atheist, but I was making it very clear that I was doing the job. So when you talk about evil,
Sure.
All my life has been spent helping people that have had dire situations to see. I see no evil in myself. I wish everybody well. I'm here to enjoy myself and enjoy the life that I have. So far, I've been here for 71 years. I hope to be here for another 20, 30 years. So help me God.
Yeah, well, Steve, I don't doubt one bit that you live a virtuous life, and that is not what I am saying. I have never seen a human being who has never said a lie in his life or her life. And that's what I mean by there's some kind of bent towards evil in the heart of human. So if I can examine myself, if you can tell me, George, have you ever said a lie in your life? I would be lying to say I have never lied in my life. And that's what I mean by there's bent towards evil. I was never referring to you doing evil things. You're a wonderful man. But there is a bent towards evil that's in the human heart. I need to ask, where did that come from? And if any of you would say, raise your hand and say, I've never said a lie in my life, I would like to talk to you and learn from you.
Having started this, let me just jump in. I'm sure George wasn't saying you in particular are evil.
I absolutely take no offense. No offense at all.
But the point that I was making is that a lot of the evil that happens, I mean, tonight we were talking about natural evils and horrendous evils and so on. But I think we would all agree at this table that a lot of the evil that happens in the world, not due to Steve or George personally, but it does come from human beings. I don't think you would disagree with that. There are people who do evil in the world. Yeah. You mentioned 1 or 2, but we don't want to talk politics. Was that fair?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure as to the point that's trying to be made, but suffice it to say, There is evil and there's telling a lie, and you know, where is the difference between, or distinction between a lie and an untruth, and when is a lie hurtful and an untruth not hurtful? So there are those sorts of issues, and that's not a debate we want to get into right now.
No, that's another whole big topic. Okay, so, sir, would you like to maybe give us your name and ask your question, please? If there's a green light, you're okay.
Yep, okay, sorry.
You can hold it.
No, sorry, that's better. Okay. First of all, I'm not a believer, and I'm not a non-believer. I do believe in God, but I don't believe in religion. I've been like that for the last... Sorry. I've been like that for the last almost 20 years, but anyhow, there are definitely points of agreement with both of you, but definitely there are other points of disagreement with both of you. First of all, religion, its type of philosophy, especially... Okay, yep.
Thank you.
Religion is a type of philosophy, and I believe that Christianity is very deep in philosophy, especially it has been created in Alexandria. And at that time...
Sorry, I said I'm going to be a bit annoying today. What is the question you want to ask?
Okay, the question is, what is the definition of good and evil? Because that's not standard between different nations and between different people. Whatever good for you can be bad for other people, like whatever happened in Jericho during the migration of Israelites towards the Holy Land or whatever. So what is the definition of good and bad?
That's a great question.
And whether, whatever the definition according to Christianity, is that the fair treatment for the other people, for everyone, or it's biased for some people against the others? Okay?
Okay, who'd like to... I think both of you probably want to say something, so who'd like to go first?
Go ahead, Steve.
So I think it was Aristotle that said essentially what was repeated by Jesus, and do unto others as you'd have others do unto you, or put differently, don't do to others what you wouldn't want others to do to you. And I think as long as the person isn't a masochist, in which case we'd probably disagree because they like to be hurt, then it's a matter of staying with those principles. And that's how I think I would judge what's good and bad.
But
George.
wouldn't, like you said, I mean, a masochist would be an exception to that. So, does it just come down to people's opinions, preferences? Or is there some kind of objective good and evil?
No, look, I think that it does... No, I don't believe in objective good and evil, because good and evil evolve. And, 2,000 years ago, if you're homosexual, they'd stone you to death. If you were interpreted to be a witch 400 years ago in Europe, they would put you in the female, they'd put you in the water. If you drowned, you were innocent. If you survived, you were guilty, and they killed you. So there are a lot of absurdities. So I think that collectively, as a society, if we take the approach of treating others the way you'd like to be treated and not treating others the way you wouldn't like to be treated, and that's in a collective sense, then that to me is what good and evil are.
So would you say there is anything at all that is objectively good or objectively evil? Because on that view, you mentioned a lot of stuff that God did that was horrible, but on that view, if God wants to do it, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with it.
If that's his opinion, and if that's your opinion of him, but my opinion of him,
right.
And I can, when I talk, all I'm doing is giving you my opinion. I'm not giving you necessarily a fact.
Yeah.
It's a fact in my mind.
Sure.
but that fact can differ from your fact.
Right, yeah, okay, no, thank you. Look, I mean, I think at least that's consistent, which is, yeah, that's really interesting. George?
I do believe that we do have objective moral values that we can call objectively good and objectively bad. I'll give you some dramatic examples. Torturing people for fun, that is objectively bad. Child abuse, that's objectively bad, wrong, evil. Genocide, that's objectively. Now, when I say objectively wrong, it means it's wrong for you, for me, and for everyone. Slavery, and a lot of evil. That's a different question. So let's just focus on what you're saying. That's a different question. We'll get to slavery in the scriptures. I'll be more than happy to answer that, but let's focus on the question first. So what I mean to say is this. If this is objectively wrong, upon what or whom do you ground this objectivity? Because if it's objective, that means there's a reference point beyond you and beyond me that says this is wrong. And can I explain? We need to distinguish between what is descriptive and what is prescriptive, and I will explain what I mean by that. I don't mean to, again, sound dramatic here, but let's say if you were to ask Hitler, do you think killing innocent people is a good thing or a bad thing? What do you think he would say? Bad. Because killing innocent people...
Can I add one sentence, please?
Sure.
Everyone is correct according to his belief.
All right.
Okay?
Okay, so...
So whatever Hitler
Sorry, that's more than one sentence,
Yeah.
though.
whatever Hitler believed at that time.
Thank you. We'll
All right.
let George
So
finish. Yeah.
my point
You
is-
will have a chance to have a good conversation with George after we're done, by the way.
My pleasure. I would love to. Again, learn from all of you. So when I say, well, if you were to ask him, killing innocent people, is it good or bad? If he's a moral, sane person, he would say it's bad. But when he would be pressed with the question, well, what about all the killings that you've done? His response would be, well, they're not innocent. He actually said that. They're subhuman. So the prescription of the value, you cannot escape. That is bad. But your description of the fact may justify what you're doing. In other words, you can justify that by saying they're subhuman, so I can do whatever I want. But the objective truth is, killing innocent people is bad. It's wrong. So I want to go back to objectivity must be grounded in an objective being. Who is that being? That would be the question.
So if I understand what you're saying, George, there is an objective good and evil.
Correct.
And when someone like Steve looks at things in the Old Testament, is he not applying that objective standard? Is he wrong to do that?
He's not wrong to do that at all. Evil is evil, but I just don't know what the reasons for this evil is. And I claim to know. But again, if that is the case, then I must be omniscient. I must know everything for me to say that is evil. So again, back to the epistemic humility that I must have. But I cannot deny the fact that there is evil that exists out there. And as we both agreed, Steve and I, it's bothersome. We don't like it. But we need to ask ourselves, why don't we like it? Where does this moral outrage come from?
And I've just realised I've misrepresented you there, Steve, because you're not applying an objective standard of evil, of good and evil. So I take that one back. Thank you very much, sir, for that fascinating question. Our next questioner, please.
Hi everyone. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, George. Thank you, Abuna. My name's James. I'm a full-time Coptic Christian, casual heretic, mostly on weekends. Just a very quick comment to Steve, because I think my questions are going to be more towards you, George. I think, along with Abuna's stance of, that's not the God that I want to believe in, that's where I think most of your talk didn't necessarily resonate with me, but I really loved your last point about the evil that is in the world, and it's up to us to really try to fight it. Thank you. George, as a Christian, yes. I love the talk. as a non-Christian, I feel like it wouldn't have resonated with me. I feel like and I know there are the limitations of time, but I feel like the target audience was more for a people that already have some familiarity with God or are in the faith or maybe even on the fence. Because I feel like from a logical point of view, it wasn't convincing, and maybe when I reflect on myself, it might be other stuff that sort of made me feel like the talk appealed to me. So as a non-Christian, I have a few questions.
Sure.
I'll ask one, if I'm allowed to ask more, that's fine. Two in one. So you made the point about how in our limited vision, we can only see, a small set of circumstances. We don't know the future, or we don't know the ripple effects and all of this type of stuff. Now, as a non-Christian, I would be thinking, well, just because I can't see the future, I can't see the ripple-on effects and all of this type of stuff, can that conceivably justify, say, the killing or the suffering of just one child? And just sort of as a follow-on to that, the example of your... I'm so sorry, I think they're related.
Go.
The example of your son, and I hear this example a lot of, the short-term pain for the greater goal, vaccinations or whatever it might be. But that's just an example, and I feel like there would definitely be situations where there is no conceivable benefit at all to the suffering that is happening, like the girls' school that was bombed. Like, what greater purpose could there be for that? I just can't imagine it, or I can't imagine someone that isn't as strong in the faith or in the faith at all to see the value of that on any level.
I hear you. But let me ask you. No, go ahead. Yeah. Let me ask you. Why can't you imagine a good reason? Why?
Well, I think it comes down to that objectivity of good and evil. And I feel, and I should give a bit of context, I'm someone that's gone through a lot of loss and pain. I lost both of my parents 12, 13 years ago.
Sorry to hear that.
It's fine. I mean, it's for the greater good. And I say that as a joke because at the funeral, I had very well-meaning Christians coming up saying to me, "Oh, you must be happy your parents are in heaven, or your mum's in heaven," all of that. I know it's very silly, but this is a mentality that exists, and that might be one extreme, but I feel that when I'm asked, well, you can't see any good, or you can't imagine this, well, no, I can't. Like, for me, it's inconceivable because it goes against the very objectivity of what is good.
Yeah.
To me, like, as in that is my personal perspective, and there's other things that inform the faith, but for someone that isn't rooted in that faith, how would you answer that question?
What's your name again?
James.
James. Yeah. I really appreciate what you're saying, James. And I feel the heartfelt question. I really do appreciate it. And I would love to continue conversation with you beyond our meeting today, if that's okay with you.
Of course, yeah.
Because I see the reality of pain in the way you asked the question. See, I'll tell you, no matter what I say, and with all due respect, Steve, no matter what we say, when you feel this, or when you've experienced this existential pain and hurt, I don't think any words, I don't think any logic, or any philosophy, or any religion, or anything like that would just give you the satisfaction and the fulfillment. But there's one what do you think there's one thing that you need that will give you some consolation and comfort during this very difficult times in your life? What is it that you think you would need?
Well, for me personally, it's been faith. The faith that... So for me personally, I feel that there is something greater, but I can't put any logic to it, and I think internally that's where the struggle is. So if you ask me, well, what is the logical reasoning as to why, things happen or this evil has happened, I want to be able to give you a logical reason. I might be able to say things like, well, after this happened, I came closer to God, or this started happening for me in my life, and all this stuff.
Sure.
But it's almost like just really trying to struggle to find reasoning.
Yes.
But the faith in God that that faith that's grown from other things and not necessarily the logical reason behind evil, I think, is where my faith is at, not necessarily a logical answer
Sure.
to.
Can I
So
tell
we
you
do have
something?
a few other questioners, so we might try and maybe
Yeah, just
give George a last word on this one.
Real quick, James. If you're waiting for a logical answer to the problem or to the suffering or the tragedies and all of that, I can tell you flat out, I cannot give you a logical answer. I wish I could. But I know what I would need during these times that will give me comfort. Does it make sense logically? I'll be very honest with you. It doesn't. And if you look and seek logical explanation, I'm afraid you will not get what you're looking for.
Thank you very much for that, James. Before we go to the next question, though, Steve, I'm interested to know if you met James and he's, speaking about you're aware that he's been through difficult times and so on. I'd be interested to know what would your approach be?
If you could. I would simply. Thanks. I would really don't think you're alone in losing your parents and losing different people. My mother died very young as well. I'm assuming your parents died young, and I grieved. I didn't have anything to lean on. I had a wife. I leaned on her, but in the absence of a wife of your own, you'd be very welcome to come onto my shoulder.
Thank you.
Thank you. That is a lovely response.
I have a wife and a kid and one on the way. Oh, thank you.
He does.
If I get divorced, I'll let you know. I'm around. Thank you. And thanks, Abuna.
Thank you. Our next question, please.
Thank you both. Peter here. I've got a bit of a thought that I want clarification on from a Christian perspective and also for Steve. It seems to me that God has risked so much to give us free will to choose Him to do good in the world and to choose good over evil. The flood, deaths, although He chooses one person, He will go after one sheep and leave the 99. There are a lot more sheep that burn in hell, just so we have the chance to choose God and to have that relationship with Him and to know what is truly good. So if that's the focus of Christianity and so much is relying on...
Sorry, Peter, I'm going to push you to the question again.
Yeah, I'm about to... if that is the case, then what, with the absence of that, how can we say anything is good or evil with the absence of free will that God has risked so much for us to have? Absence of free will, how can we say, where's the meaning? Where's good and where's evil?
Yeah, so do you believe there is genuine libertarian free will?
Look, I'd like to answer that in a particular way, and it takes me back to heaven and hell, so please excuse me for answering it this way. But assuming that heaven is, as George described it, the presence of Jesus or God, and hell is, I don't know what you might imagine it to be, whether it's burning fires or otherwise, doesn't matter. The thing is, if it's possible to have a state of existence in heaven where free will exists, but evil does not, then the free will defense on earth fails, because by creating earth, a place where free will leads to horrific suffering, God has chosen a strictly inferior design. This suggests that He is either not all-powerful, He couldn't make earth like heaven, or not all good, He chose to include suffering. So when people go to heaven, only the good go to heaven, and they don't do acts of evil, then God has chosen Christians often to me say, well, what do you want? You want just robots that are all good? But what God has chosen, according to their belief, is only allowing robots into heaven. And that to me makes no sense.
May I respond to that real quick? Sorry. I think we need to have an accurate definition of freedom. There is a secular definition of freedom, and there's a biblical definition of freedom. Let me explain. What is the secular definition of freedom? Do whatever you want to do. License to do whatever you want to do. But that is not the biblical definition of freedom. The biblical definition of freedom was actually articulated by a philosopher by the name of Lord Acton, a British philosopher. He said, freedom, biblically speaking, is not the license to do what you please to do. It is the power to do what you ought to do. That is the biblical definition of freedom. We were created to worship God, to have communion with God. That is the essence of freedom. We're free to be who we are meant to be. In heaven, we will ultimately be free because that's what we are created to be. So, I think we're confusing two things. They're two different things, freedom from and freedom to. Secularly, I want to be free from boundaries, restrictions, authorities, and all that. But you need to ask the question, what am I free for? So freedom to what? To live your life according to what you were created to do, and that is worship God.
Thank you. Just before you respond, I will sorry, I will let you respond, but I just want to say something quickly. We're going to close the question pew. No, stay. If you're there, stay, just because our time's running out. So thank you for those who came and asked questions. If you have them, you'll still have a chance afterwards, hopefully. No, well, afterwards, yeah. Okay, so sorry.
So just so you know, should you get to heaven, don't go looking for me, I won't be there.
Thank you very much.
If he gets to heaven, don't go looking for me, I won't be there.
I'm a little bit shorter.
I hope, well, I'm not sure I'm going to get there anyway, so there's no point arguing about that. Can I just, before we go to the next question, a quick follow-up on Peter's question, Steve. Would you agree that there is a substantial difference between people in heaven and people on earth in this sense? The people in heaven have already lived a life on earth, whereas the people on earth, if we had the heavenly kind of state, would not have already lived a life on earth and made choices and so on.
So if this God only wants people to be the way he wants them to be, why bother having people suffer that don't recognise him? So me, I wouldn't go to this wonderful place because I won't accept his existence. He hasn't proven himself to me. So he is, let's assume for a sec that he exists. He is incompetent to prove to me that he exists, and he's incompetent to prove so that the world is made up of 8 or 9 billion people by now, and around about 1 billion believe in a Christian God, and then a subset of that believe in the Coptic Christian God, and he's incapable of convincing all those other people of his existence and requiring them to be the sycophants that he wishes them to be.
So my question was more specific about the robot objection, right? That without free will, we'd just be robots. And I'm just asking whether you see that the people in heaven are not robots because they lived a life of free will first. If God had just made the earth to be like heaven, then they would never have lived that life, never made decisions, never chosen between good and evil. They truly would be robots in that case, whereas the people in heaven are not truly robots because they've already gone through and decided who they want to be. Does that distinction make sense to you?
Not at all.
All righty. We'll leave it there. Maybe we can chat later on. What's your name, Susie?
Thank you. I'm Susie. And I just wanted I suppose there could be a question, but I wanted to clarify your opening paragraph, please, Steve. Could you just clarify the opening paragraph that you read? Thank you.
Tell me when to stop.
Okay.
Does evil prove that there isn't a God? For over 50... Yeah, okay, you don't want that bit. Why should the presence of evil prove or disprove the presence of God? In fact, the presence of evil proves that God does indeed exist.
Okay, right there. And then you said people would be shocked at that statement, your atheist friends. So the presence of evil proves that God does exist. But then you continued on to say that you still do not believe in a God. So can you just clarify your belief?
Sarcasm isn't a good sense of humour, is it? It's not a good form of humour, but that's what it was. So I was being sarcastic. I was saying that I would believe that there's this God because everything that I have read points to the fact that he is evil, and he's proven himself to be evil. And in proving himself to be evil and following through, and everything that has happened is clearly part of his plan, that should lead me to believe that he exists. But as is clear to you, I don't believe in any gods.
Okay. And the thought process of him proving he is evil is based on the biblical doctrine that you've read and subjectively translated.
For the purposes of this discussion today, yes, he has proven himself to be evil, and he has been consistent for the millennia.
So then my final question then is subjectivity of interpretation of biblical doctrine open to the discussion of the debate of God being evil, if that makes sense?
So my difficulty, Susan, is that in my mind, everything that is in the Bible is man-made, man-composed fiction, and is irrelevant to any reality.
We need another talk about this. This is...
Yes,
I want to understand.
It's funny you mention that, because one of our talks last year was on God in the Old Testament and why does he seem to do such horrible things, by Father Paul Fanous, who lectures in Old Testament at St. Cyril's. Yeah. So I refer you to the YouTube video. Please do have a look and check in on what he said.
I'm actually more interested to hear Steve's point of view.
Yes.
Thank you for the questions.
Maybe we'll get him back.
Steve, I have a question, a quick one. You mentioned God is incompetent because...
Does that mean a quick answer?
I'll leave the answer up to you. God is incompetent because he has not proven himself to me. What does it take for you to believe in God? What kind of proof, evidence do you need?
Now, this is a very interesting question, and if I can bore you for a minute, I was in a Shia fellow, Shia Muslim, was very interested to have an interview with me. He had interviewed people of different religious faiths, and he thought, I haven't interviewed an atheist. I wonder whether I could interview an atheist. And we got talking, and as we had with George and Athanasius, we had a very convivial discussion. Ours was only about an hour. With this guy, it was like 2-3 hours. But anyway, it was all quite convivial. And then we met, and he got his interview with me. And he asked me exactly the same question. I remember the answer. So you get to hear the answer. So there were 2 chairs, there was a table, and there was a spare chair. And I said to him, if he was to come here, sit on that chair. Can I just ask a quick question? Does anybody here swear? Nobody swears? Okay. That's okay. That's okay. I'll answer that. Thank you. Thank you. I just want to be clear. I said I would, to prove that God exists, he would have to come and sit on that chair right now and explain to me whether all the suffering and death and destruction and all the nasty stuff which can be abbreviated to a four-letter word starting with S and ending in T, that he had created, was it his design or did it happen despite him? And the Muslim fellow said, you can't talk to God like that. And I said, God has to be responsible for everything that he's done. And that is my answer.
But do you use that same standard in other areas like science and history? Because it seems to me that you may not be, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't want to put the words in your mouth, you may not be evaluating evidence, you're setting an ultimatum. But what about, I'm sure as a physician you're an evidentialist. In other words, you follow the evidence where it leads. So if I see evidence sufficient enough for me to believe that there's got to be a divine transcendent being, that would suffice for me. But setting an ultimatum like that may not be fair for me.
I guess what's fair for you and what's fair for me and what's fair for anybody else is a matter of opinion. As far as history, history's a difficult place to be because, as we probably all understand, history is usually written by the victors. So we understand Egyptian civilization, Roman civilization, American civilization, Australian civilization by what is written. That's not to say that it's fact. It is recorded by somebody who has an opinion, who may have a bent. Can we rely on it? Well, you know, that's up to us, and it's up to how much research we can do and how much we're prepared to believe the author of the history. If we accept Stalin's history of the USSR, then it's a very different USSR that we understand to the one that we understand written by Australian historians or American historians. So history isn't necessarily to be believed on face value. To be comfortable with history, you would probably have to research it. And then it's a question of how much research are you prepared to do to find out how true that history is. And, you know, we accept history in a different way. We've accepted history in a different way in the past to what we do now, because today there's a very different reality. And we can be presented with AI images that we could believe. We can be affected by influencers who know stuff all about anything, but have an opinion that is followed by millions of people and therefore has gravitas. And that's a problem today. As far as science goes, yes, I am a man of science. And science doesn't ask us to believe anything. Science asks us to prove what is or is not, and science is prepared to be proven wrong. So, there are various laws in science, there are various facts in science. We know that if you combine oxygen and hydrogen, you're going to get water, indisputable, proven, no question about it. There are factors in science that we can be unsure of, and that requires further investigation, testing, and the like. The situation with the God, for me, is that there is a book that was written 2,000 years ago, which is the New Testament, and an older book that was written I don't know how many years before that, which is the Old Testament, and then there's a book that was written 1,400 years ago by a fellow who was illiterate, that is the absolute word of God, that is incoherent, incomprehensible, but is known to be fact by 1.6 billion people on planet Earth. And I can't accept that, and I won't accept that, and I won't base my life on any of it.
So, Our time has run out. I notice our last questioner seems to have... Sure. I will just make one quick comment and then we'll wrap up because the time has run out. I think I would maybe go a different way. If God appeared to me on a chair and started explaining himself, that would be a God I could not believe in, because he would just be one more thing among all the other things within the universe. And I think that goes back to one of the issues that has been plaguing the discussion today. I think our conceptions of God, I think, are basically different. And maybe that is, well, not maybe, that is a topic for another discussion, I think. All right, so thank you all for coming. We really appreciate your time. We're done for today. There will be there are snacks out there. I don't know if our speakers can hang around for a little or not. We'll see how much we can. When they need to go, we're just going to rush them out of the door. But thank you both. Steve, thank you very much for coming. We really appreciate it. And thanks for working with us. And thank you so much, George.
Thank you, I just want to say thank you to Ustad Abuna. I just want to say real quick, I really appreciate this time. Thank you, Abuna, for giving me this opportunity. Steve, I appreciate your open-mindedness, your flexibility, and what you have shared with us. I have learned quite a bit, so I appreciate that, Steve. I do appreciate your attendance, your questions, those who ask questions, and I hope we can do this once again. So thank you, Abuna, for giving me this opportunity.
Just have to come back to Australia again. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy your night. Enjoy the snacks.
Thank you very much.